booktube, the inconsistent reader here with part 21, Fast and Thick. Now, shit is starting to get hot and heavy, and Lydia's really starting to feel the heat. She's not only had a crap day, but incredibly busy day. And I quote, "I thought I had everything in order, but the best laid plans gang aft ugly, and trouble comes in threes." Now, up until now, I had only heard Sideshow Bob say gang ugly, the gang ugly quote. So what does it mean? Okay, well, it means often go wrong. And it was first penned in a poem by the Scottish poet Robert Burns, like way back in the day. I think it was the 1700s. Anyway, back to the story. So apparently, this day was all go. Like, the first one in her office that day was Aunt Vidala, and she wanted to talk with Lydia about Immortelle, Becca, Aunt Immortelle, you know what the said, and Aunt Victoria, Hannah's upcoming Pearl Girls mission. Now, she expresses her concern that not only are they a bit green, but she feels like Aunt Victoria is a defection risk because she has been reading some questionable materials. Apparently, Aunt Vidala saw Hannah's bloodlines file on her desk. So Lydia's like, who would do such a thing without my permission? I can't have this kind of subordination. Oh, Lydia. She tells Aunt Vidala that Aunt Victoria is strong enough of mind now not to be swayed by flowery ideals. But Aunt Vidala says she doesn't believe it. I mean, after all, her mother was a handmaid. And not just any handmaid. The one who smuggled out baby Nicole. And don't forget the very credible rumor that her mother also works for Mayday. And I quote, "We win some, we lose some," I said. "That's an odd way of putting it," said Aunt Vidala. I love how flippant Lydia seems to be right now. She tells Aunt Vidala thanks for her advice and her opinion, and that she's sure Aunts Victoria and Immortelle's Pearl Girl mission will be a success. To which Aunt Vidala replies, and I quote, "We shall see," said Aunt Vidala with a half smile. "But if she defects, kindly remember that I warned you." This is funny. The problem is Aunt Vidala is observant, smart, and evil. She is a hardcore believer, and that's dangerous. I kind of want to hear how Aunt Vidala got like this. I'm always interested in the motivations of gender traders. Like, what makes you turn on your own gender? Like, what makes you decide women can't control themselves and need you to not only boss them around, but punish them with such zeal? Next to hit up Aunt Lydia was Aunt Helena. Now, Aunt Helena wanted to let Aunt Lydia know that Aunt Victoria was reading her own bloodlines file. Aunt Lydia tells her, "Yeah, Aunt Vidala just told me about that, and I'll tell you what I told her. She's been brought up and educated well." And I quote, "Is it your theory that nature will win out over nurture? Because if so, Gilead is doomed, right?" And Aunt Helena's like, "Oh no, nothing like that." She tells Aunt Helena that she thinks Mayday is trying to reunite Nicole with her mother, but assures Helena that Nicole is safe. Nicole doesn't know who she is yet. Aunt Helena's like, "That's good. We need to break her in gently because she's young and vulnerable, and it might break her pliable mind." Aunt Lydia's like, and I quote, "My thoughts exactly. But in the meantime, I would like you to observe the movements of Aunt Vidala." She tells Aunt Helena she thinks Aunt Vidala gave Aunt Victoria that file, but she can't imagine why. Maybe to shake Hannah's confidence and cause her to make mistakes. And Aunt Helena's like, and I quote, Vidala never liked her, said Aunt Helena, even when she was in school. Now, Aunt Helena left happily because she had herself a little spy mission. Aunt Lydia went to the cafe to get tea and chill for a bit. But Aunt Elizabeth comes rushing in and straight over to Aunt Lydia. And she told her there are eyes and angels in Ardua Hall, like a lot of them. Elizabeth asked Lydia if she's okayed this. And I quote, "Calm yourself," I said. My own heart was beating fast and thick. Where exactly were they? She tells her they were in the print shop and they actually arrested Aunt Wendy. And I quote, "This is unprecedented," I said, rising to my feet. "I shall demand a meeting with Commander Judd immediately." So Aunt Lydia goes to her office to call Commander Judd on her direct line. But when she got there, he was already there. Commander Judd told Lydia that he needed to explain himself, but he said it in a very icy tone. So Lydia returns in kind, coldly and calmly, telling the commander she is sure they must have a good reason. They sit. He told her that the Pearl Girls were being used unwittingly by carrying the microdots on their brochures. And I quote, he paused to note my response. Aunt Lydia, of course, puts on her best performance to date and feigns astonishment. The impertinence! Meanwhile, in her mind, she's thinking, what took you idiots so long to find those? She had given them too much credit in that regard. She asked the commander if he had any proof of this. Judd tells her, well, we thought if we questioned Aunt Wendy, we would get the truth. And Lydia tells him that Aunt Wendy is far too dumb to have devised such a plan and that they should just release her. Commander Judd says in return, and I quote, "So we have concluded. She will recover from the shock in our common bomb clinic," he said. Now inside, Lydia's breathing a sigh of relief, maybe even peed herself just a little bit. I don't know. I know she's stone cold, but she may have peed herself a little bit. She composed her inside self and asked him if they found any microdots on the brochures they confiscated from the print shop. And he says no, they didn't find any on those, but they did find some on the brochures that came back from Canada. And this is obviously the reason they raided the print shop in the first place. Aunt Lydia tells Commander Judd she has always pretty much doubted Aunt Vidala, but Aunts Elizabeth and Helena also have clearance to the print shop. And lest we not forget, she herself has clearance and therefore should also be under suspicion. To which Judd replies, and I quote, "Aunt Lydia, you must have your little jokes," he said, "even at a time like this." This is awesome news for Lydia, you know. He can't even fathom that she would be the traitor to this cause. I mean, after all, look at all she's done in the name of Gilead. Judd tells Lydia it will look bad on both of them if they don't find out who's actually behind this soon. In the meantime, he has a plan to redeem them. If they bring out baby Nicole and announce his engagement to her, this will raise both their standings. And I quote, "Brilliant, as usual," I said. "But you are married. How is the health of my wife?" he asked, raising his eyebrows reproachfully. Let's discuss. Lydia cannot believe he had the audacity to use rat poison on Shunammite. In this day and age, it's so easily detectable, even in trace amounts. He clearly no longer gives enough fucks to even try to cover up his murderous ways. This is one of the problems with too much power. It gets abused. Greed produces more greed. In the immortal words of C. Montgomery Burns, I'd trade it all for a little more. Anyway, back to the story. Lydia tells Judd she's doing better, but she very well could have a relapse. And he couldn't resist asking how soon she might be expecting that to happen. To which Lydia ends the chapter by saying, and I quote, "Soon enough," I said. And that's the end, actually. That's the end of section 21, Fast and Thick. Lydia needs to switch into high gear if she wants to pull this off. She seems to be doing all right so far. We'll see. Next up is section 22, Heartstopper. This is another alternating view section with Hannah and Nicole, and this is how their chapters will be from now on. It'll be both of them. And there's only 62 pages left. Get on the bandwagon, people! Thank you for watching this episode of The Testaments. I am the Inconsistent Reader, and as always, make good choices.